super friends. This video is just for my super friends. So people have been asking on Instagram and also in the comment section of my YouTube videos where I maybe display either of these figures as comparative, how I made these custom Superman figures. And that's because a lot of people really want a basic looking classic Trunks Superman with a nice big fat S on his chest. And I happen to like this head sculpt. Some people don't. I do. And so it's, I guess, struck a chord with some people because I get actually a fair amount of questions about it. So I figured that I would make a video about it because a few people have asked me to do so. So I'll just take you quickly through how I put these together and what steps I had to take. We're going to start with this one first because this is the one that garners the most questions. Now, as you can see, this is primarily a Rebirth Superman build from the Multiverse. Same head, cape, torso, arms, legs. The only difference is I painted on the trunks here, as you can see. And the paint that I used is this stuff right here. It's called Painters. And it's a permanent paint. It's an oil-based paint. And it dries, as you can see, in a way that's not going to rub off. So that's the paint that I used to make this happen. And admittedly, I'm not going to lie. If you're looking at this saying, painted on trunks just look ridiculous, I'm right there with you. I think that this does look kind of ridiculous based on the fact that Superman's sculpt here in the groin area, really, it is kind of narrow and makes his legs look a little spindly. I wish they had done that a little bit different, but I just painted them because that's going to be more accurate to what they would do with the Multiverse Superman. Well, we've seen that with the Kingdom Come. The trunks are just painted on. Also for the belt, how I attach that, usually what I would do to crack a DC Universe Classics or some of the older Multiverse bodies is I would just part the legs, take a very small drill bit and drill a tiny hole in there. I actually go through it in my Kitbash 101 video, how to crack a body. And I couldn't use my normal technique with this because the waist peg is actually attached to the lower half of the body. Whereas with a DC Universe Classics figure, and some of the older Multiverse figures, the waist peg was a separate piece that fit inside the lower half and the upper half of the body as well. So it was just a completely different setup. So when you crack the body, the peg, which is actually the front and back seam, the peg is stuck together. When you pull it apart, the peg just gets obliterated. You got to be really careful, and my peg came apart, so I lost it. So in the end, what I decided to do was just put the DC Universe Classics belt on his body and then just glue the body right to the belt. I know that takes away some articulation, and that's definitely a negative point, but this one also is basically a prototype. If I ever attempt this again, I'll find a way to keep that peg if possible. And then down here is the next question you might be asking is, how did you get DC Universe Classics Superman boots on very clearly the legs that were designed for the Multiverse Superman? And that was a bit more technical. Like, just putting on the legs for this figure takes the customization difficulty from like a 4 to a 7, because getting these on was actually really difficult. I had to, first of all, take a DC Universe Classics pair of Superman legs, and I had to knife off his legs right at the top of the boot very, very carefully so as not to damage the boot, following the boot line as best I could. And then I had to Dremel the boot out and even leave a little indent so that when I cut the legs properly, I could leave a little peg and it could sit right inside the boot to give the glue more to hold on to. But it's the getting the lines straight that is very, very challenging, because as you can see, these boots, they're not straight, they're angled. They actually go up a little bit at the front and they come up a little bit at the back and flatten out, which makes it challenging. And maybe the camera's not going to pick up exactly what the angle is, but it's a lot of time I spent with a Dremel very, very carefully grinding the legs and the boots down until they were as perfect a match as I could get. Admittedly, if we can just get some light on this to show you, this admittedly is not perfect. You can see a hole there, you can see a scuff at the top of that boot, and the lines don't completely perfectly match up. But I'm okay with that for my first attempt at doing a complete and total boot swap for boots that are not intended to come off. I think that this actually turned out pretty good. Looking ahead to the future, if I attempt this figure again, I will probably end up getting my hands on an open-boxed DC Essentials Superman and using those boots on this figure. I know the ankles can be kind of wonky, but this body isn't so heavy that it'll make them fall over as much. A DC Essentials is a heavier figure, so I would probably do that differently. If you're looking to customize this, I would say get your hands on an open-box DC Essentials Superman and don't go through with all the grinding of these boots, because it was just a total time-consuming pain in the keister. Now for this one's actually a lot easier. I did use a cloth goods cape with this one. This was my first test with this material. I don't really like it. I'll probably switch to something else. So this is an interim cape. It's kind of, you know, here just for now, gone tomorrow sort of deal. But I took off the plastic cape, and you can tell because there's a paint scuff where it ripped the paint off the figure. But I took off the plastic cape, and then I drilled a hole here and a hole here, and I had to drill out the inside a little bit too, so that I could stuff the cape in. And basically you've got this hole that you've drilled, and you just stuff the cape in with a small implement of some kind. In my case, it's just a small screwdriver, and you just keep stuffing it in and stuffing it in until it's there. Now, looking up close, this was one of my first cape stuffs, and it definitely could be a little neater. But it's really hard to keep this figure from moving or the drill from moving when you're drilling down. I would probably use maybe a melting technique in the future like I've used on others. Like possibly like I've done... Oh, this one, no, this one's completely different. That's a whole neck piece. I'll put that in a different video. But it's not super hard. You just got to be very careful and willing to accept the fact that you may completely botch it and then have a completely knackered torso that's pretty much useless. I also cut off the sleeves right here, the cuffs that you would normally get on the Superman figure. I cut those off completely just because I wanted to have a very classic look. And then the bottom half of his body is actually just a DC Universe Classics style Public Enemies Superman lower half. And the thing is, it would have worked out a whole lot better because you can see that the red of the S and the trunks and the boots is actually a pretty good match. It actually looks, you know, very, very comparable, but the blue on these Public Enemies Superman figures for the top half of the legs, which is a different kind of plastic in comparison to the lower half, it changes color over time. It actually yellows, but because it's blue, when it yellows, it turns this slightly darker, very, 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 there's a hint of green in here. You wouldn't know it by the camera. There is just a hint of green in these, and over time, this might actually discolor even more. And then the boots for these, this is the unfortunate part, they're just painted on, which is what they're doing with the Multiverse anyway. But that's all I did for the lower half. And if you're wondering about the peg, because I mentioned the peg with this one, the peg for this one, you didn't have to worry about it. I just used the peg that came on the Public Enemies. I had to drill the hole in his body a little bit bigger to fit the peg inside the torso because it is a smaller hole with these Multiverse figures, but it came together really, really nicely. And this might be, let's say you keep this cape on this figure and don't mess with the cuffs. If you're looking for just a basic post Action Comics 1000 Superman, this would probably be your easiest bet if you just keep the figure as is from the waist up and take a Public Enemies Superman and change it from the waist down. And then, yeah, you got to paint the belt loops because Public Enemies didn't paint the belt loops either. But that's pretty much it. That's how I did it. That's how I did both of these custom Superman figures. I do hope that Multiverse bestows upon us, you know, a proper, actual, real classic, or at least post-Action Comics 1000 Superman. We are getting the Superman Kingdom Come in the Multiverse. I'll likely pick up, you know, 2 of those, one of them to customize and see what I can do with it. But in the meantime, this is the best I could do for a Multiverse basic classic-ish looking Superman. But yeah, I'm so glad you guys requested this video and that I actually had the time to nip away and make it for you, aside from the stuff that I would usually be doing. If you like this video, please smooch it with a like so I know I'm doing something right. If you'd like to see more from my channel, well, you know where the subscribe button is, and maybe twang the bell if you'd like to see more so that you never miss a video, and I'll see you at the next one. Thank you so much for watching, and have an awesome day, super friends. Take care.